All right, Brandy, you are good to go.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to the subcommittee meeting on the proposed new comment to Rule 1.1 of the Rules of Professional Conduct. Again, let me begin by reading the ethics information. Members of the subcommittee are hereby advised of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict, and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this committee with respect to which there's a conflict of interest or appearance of a conflict. Anyone see a conflict? I see Bill Mills is, looks like he's vacationing a little bit. Good to have you here, Bill. Okay, let's, I guess everyone knows that from the last meeting of the ethics committee in I guess in July, that the what we had submitted before was sent back, I guess primarily based on comments that we had received. And so I don't know how much discussion. I had a conflict myself with the grievance committee that I was on, so I wasn't able to attend, but I'm assuming there was not a lot of discussion within the ethics committee.
No, there wasn't. The general kind of our standard operating procedure is essentially that if once we publish something, the first time that we publish something, if we receive comments on that particular published amendment, that it typically does go back to subcommittee. Of course, there's exceptions. It's not a hard and fast rule, but I think just the general procedure would be to send it back to subcommittee to consider those comments, have time to give have thoughtful conversation about the comments to see if the subcommittee wants to do something different, alter what was previously published in light of the comments and things of that nature. So that's why it was sent back to subcommittee to get an opinion from this subcommittee about whether or not the proposed comment should be revised, should continue on as previously published, or any other course of action.
Well, I want to give everybody a chance to chime in, but honestly, I think probably the first thing we need to do is to make sure we want to move forward. I mean, is everybody in agreement that, or not? I mean, I'm not trying to sway the way we vote, but do we still wish to pursue a new comment on bias and cultural differences?
Is this just the portion of the that would be in the commentary part?
Yes, that's all this subcommittee is dealing with is proposed.
Yeah, I am in favor of having that in our preamble as an aspiration for what attorneys should strive to be. I think the making it a rule that can be enforced has got some potential constitutional issues regarding free speech, but I think for purposes of aspiration, it should be in our preamble. So that's my vote.
And I'm sharing my screen now just so make sure we're all on the same page. And we're talking about this comment here. This is what was published. This is the comment to Rule 1.1. 1.1, of course, deals with competency, and the language that this subcommittee had recommended and the council agreed to publish for comment is here listed in red. Competency includes a lawyer's awareness of implicit bias and cultural differences relative to a client or anyone involved in a client's matter that might affect the lawyer's representation of the client. This is to ensure understanding of the client's needs, effective communication with the client and others, and adequate representation of the client. And I guess, Brandy, if I may, I'll just kind of say, we did receive a number of comments. Those were provided to the subcommittee for review. Comments ranged from supportive to opposed for a variety of reasons. There were some comments that had, I guess, those that supported the inclusion of this type of comment, but still suggested some potential amendments that for the subcommittee and the council to consider. But I guess I leave it to you all to have read those comments. I don't plan to go through in detail every single comment that we received. They were published in the ethics committee agenda that was provided to the full council, as well as again sent to you all via email. So I think, Brandy, I think your starting point is a good one, just to kind of get a sense of, does the subcommittee still feel like a comment addressing this this idea is still appropriate and should still be pursued? And then whether or not the subcommittee wants to maintain course with what was previously published, in other words, is not swayed by the comments, or if the subcommittee wants to take into consideration some of the suggested edits and perhaps revise for republication. That's up to the subcommittee to decide. But I think the first step of just confirming or disconfirming whether or not this comment is something the subcommittee wants to pursue is a great starting point.
Does anybody have any feelings along those lines or wish to be heard?
This is Stuart. I didn't see anything in the comments generated that made me change my mind on this. I think in terms of having a comment included, I think we can talk about the specific language, but I still think I'm with Bill. I think we should include this.
Okay. Matt?
The more I get into this, I kind of echo something Billy said earlier. The preamble I am fine with. It's our aspirational. This is who we as lawyers long to be. This is the Atticus Finch part of us. I get concerned the more we start getting into rules. I voted against the CLE. I'm not hiding that fact because I was, majority of my district says we don't agree with the CLE. I'm scared we get too far down the road. We're opening ourselves up to some issues. I must admit, I am very borderline on whether or not to have a comment to the rule.
Anyone else?
Randy.
Colin?
It seemed to me a number of the comments sort of blended together the various things that ethics subcommittees were looking at. And, many of the comments, some of the comments seem to focus on, even for this Rule 1.1 comment about these things like gender preference, or I can't even remember the different terms, but things that really weren't in there. This rule, the comment seems to me to be more geared to understanding your particular case. I mean, the difference between having to cross-examine a witness who is a corporate executive from the witness who might be a gangbanger, it seems to me you need to have various understanding of cultural differences and things like that to be able to properly represent your client. And that seems to me to be what 1.1 is, that you just need to recognize that, different clients have different backgrounds, and you need to take that into consideration. Of all the things we were doing, this seemed to me to be almost an understood, thing of if you're representing clients, you really need to understand your case and your clients and the people involved in order to do a proper job.
Right. Judge Dunstan?
I completely agree with what Colin said. The whole purpose of this was just to assist attorneys in the profession to be the best that we can be. That's really it. There's no punishment from this. It's not a rule necessarily. It's just a preamble. It's an aspirational goal. And all we're trying to do is assist and help to make sure that people are the most competent that they can be. That's really it. And we're saying that, listen, competency, implicit biases could hinder your ability to be competent. And when somebody gets appealed in the Court of Appeals for ineffective assistance of counsel because they weren't aware of the intricacies of their client, et cetera, and so forth, we're just trying to avoid things like that. That's really the whole point. And I agree with Colin too, that I think that people are merging a lot of different issues that are just not here. And the most important issue is that even in Rule 8.4G, if that was adopted, nothing prohibits you from not taking clients that you don't want to take. That's, so I feel like once again, we're just spinning our wheels with the same same thing that is just, we've said over and over and over again that this is not what this is. And people are still going to stand where they are. But I think that we need to I say, let's take a vote on whether or not we still want to do the comment and then go from there into the details of it.
Okay. Anybody else wish to be heard?
Granny, this is Barbara.
Hey, Barbara.
I'll just say that I remember some years ago having a similar kind of discussion about the need for an attorney to be familiar with technology in order to competently handle cases for his clients. And there was a lot of pushback on that. And I think standing here now, people would say, of course you have to be, in this day and age, but it was the same kind of arguments and sort of fear. And really all we're trying to do, as has been said, is kind of inform lawyers to help them be the best that they can be and keep them from getting in trouble.
Thank you, Madam President. Anyone else wish to be heard at this point? So I'm getting a feel that generally we want to proceed, but I will suggest that we have a vote. All those wishing to proceed with at least the exploration of a comment, not necessarily the same one that just got sent back to us, but explored continuing with this subcommittee, raise your hand. Brian, I take it you see, I'm waving my hand. I'm a yes.
Yeah, it looks to be
Yes.
unanimous on
Okay.
continuing the exploration.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Well, so now we need to talk about any kind of language. I did think, just my own observation, some things the advocates sent to us I thought were of interest. I noticed, and again, Brian may have a good bit more to say about this to suggest, I think, but I noticed the advocates' position took out kind of all. Hang on, went into the dark.
Nope. So it's motion sensor lights. You're sitting too still, Brainy.
Sorry about that. I need some more technological training, I think. But the advocates went away from some of this stuff. We get confused, and you go off on these tangents sometimes when you start talking about certain things. In the word implicit, or the phrase implicit bias, it has become one of those politically charged phrases, I think. And I noticed the advocates suggested taking implicit and replacing it with unconscious. And I think that's a very interesting way to suggest it would be something that could enhance our competencies. In other words, and they also make reference to, I believe our first line said competency includes a lawyer's awareness, then goes on from there. They suggested to just say a lawyer should be aware. It seems to take away a little bit more of the shall aspect to it. And anyway, those I thought were very interesting, that may help with some of these issues that have been raised. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Again, Brian's.
Well, I was just going to say, Stuart and Judge Dunstan have their hands up. I think, Stuart, you had your hand up first. I know you were a part of the advocates, perhaps the group that had discussed this. I saw you were copied on the letter.
That's right. I was actually the chair of this committee, and I'll tell you, so I'll give you a little background on how we came to these proposed changes on this comment. There were people in our group that were not comfortable with the language as written, and they became much more comfortable with it when we adjusted the language. And we looked at, just as Barbara mentioned, the comment that was revised or added a few years ago on technology, and looked at the language there and decided to try and track that language that uses a lawyer should be aware of. We found that when we used that language, the people in our group had much more comfort with what the comment was saying. And then the difference that we pointed out with implicit bias versus unconscious bias, if you look at it, some people may say it's the same thing. Others may feel that it's different. And unconscious bias, I think what it says is these are things that we may or may not be aware of. And that's why it's important that we be educated about it. And so as a group, we were more comfortable with unconscious bias. and cultural differences. But that was the origin of those proposed changes. And I would support those. Frankly, I was in support of the language as written, but if it makes it more palatable to more people, then I'm in support of this change. And I think they're good changes if they make more people comfortable with it.
Thank you. Judge Johnson.
Well, I want to say, I'm grateful for everyone that took the time to comment on this issue and the thoughtfulness that was taken into, even forming a committee with Stewart and the NCAJ. And I do respect that. And I don't have an issue with the one amendment. The only thing I have a pause about is changing it from implicit bias to unconscious bias, because it's literally called implicit bias. Like, that's literally what the term is. And we're literally subbing out to make, tomato, honestly, at this point. I understand some people may feel better about it, that it's unconscious, but it is still implicit. And it literally, the definition of implicit bias is that it's unconscious bias. So I don't really understand, I guess, the point of that. I do feel like just because something has been politically charged in recent years does not mean that it's something that we should waver from what it actually is and what it's actually called. Because if we're talking about something being put in place for 20, 50, 100 years after we're dead and gone, it's called implicit bias. And so I just want us to be careful to shy away from things that are currently now an issue that really have been in place for 50 years prior to this, or however it was before, that we're changing things to make people feel more comfortable, when really it's about us being the best that we can be and just being clear about what it is and what it's called. And I would even be okay with it being called awareness of implicit and or unconscious bias, if that makes somebody feel better. But I just don't really feel like we need to take out implicit whenever that's what it's actually called. And that's what the trainings are called as well.
Anyone else care to be heard on that? How do you feel about the reference to should, putting should in there, Judge? You okay with that?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
I also agree with
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I agree with the preference of implicit bias versus unconscious bias, but comfortable with the other recommended changes that from Stewart's committee.
Any other discussion or motions or anything like that? Anyone wants to suggest?
For whatever it's worth, I just wanted to share a conversation that I had with another member of our ethics committee, who was just kind of providing me some of his personal experience and how he did support this particular comment. One of the things that he had pointed out was, and this is Jack Lloyd. I'm not trying to hide that. Jack Lloyd with Legal Aid. Jack was telling me about how he was, he kind of looked at this and thought, the notion of competency and maybe even the reframing the issue to say that, not that the comment is trying to say, if you're not aware of this, that you're providing incompetent representation. And he said that he felt like in his own personal life and professional development that, once he took trainings on this topic, that he felt his representation, the services he offered to his clients really were that much more enhanced and improved. And he said, but it's one of those things, I don't look at what I did before as being incompetent representation, but that this really enhanced my ability to understand my clients and to provide even better representation. And so it struck me, as he was describing this, I thought that was a really interesting and good point, that perhaps that is a word to be included here. I don't know what you all think about that, but to say that, the purpose of being aware of this is to enhance the representation, not necessarily to send the message that if you don't know about implicit bias, you are providing incompetent representation in violation of Rule 1.1. But that this is, as we've been talking about the inclusion of the word should, that this is meant to be aspirational, not necessarily something to be enforced, but that to recognize that it makes us as lawyers that much more aware and able to understand our clients' needs and offer the services that are really going to be most effective for them. So I wanted to share that thought with you because I thought it was an interesting kind of perspective and see what the subcommittee thought about that. See, Judge Dunstan, you have your hand up.
So I love that idea because I think about the fact that I've only been practicing now 9 years, and I don't know what happened 10 years ago before I became a lawyer, right? And so when we're talking about things being here for years past our time, I'm 100% in support of us laying out what our intentions were today. Because there's a lot of rules and I have no clue why they are, how they are. And so if we have an opportunity to add an extra sentence that says that this is the purpose of this rule so that nobody is confused later on, I think that I support that.
See, Matt.
Brian, if I can jump in, and I agree, it goes back to the optics of this rule. And I think we need to do a better job of presenting, okay, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And it's like on page, if you go up a little bit from the same letter you have, it talks about what the purpose of the comment. And I think a lot of people are missing that. They're worried about, well, I'm going to suffer a violation of Rule 1.1 if I'm somehow biased or whatever the case. I think we need to do a better job of putting the optics on this. This is a comment, folks, and it reflects the aspirational goals and it provides a guide, but it is not by itself authoritative. And I think that's, if you read those materials, a lot of them are like, why are you going to punish me if I saw something about Israel in the documents? Don't have that in there. We as the state bar need to do a much better job of PR, especially on this.
Thanks, Matt.
Any other comments? So let me just ask, are we interested in adding some kind of language to that would say in an effort to enhance a lawyer's competencies, a lawyer should be aware of implicit or unconscious bias or something along those lines?
I'm fine with that.
Should we put both implicit and unconscious or unconscious, or does that get too murky? Does it get redundant? That's one of the things, some of these comments, the things we received talked about, what are the definitions of every daggone word in the substance of what we were saying. And
Randy, I think if we change it from implicit to unconscious, we're just looking at another set of definition questions. I mean, and I'll be honest, I'm having a hard time splitting the hair on one versus the other. I can't parcel much difference between the two.
so any of them?
I make a motion that we accept implicit, that stays the same as implicit bias.
Okay.
I make that motion.
I second that.
Okay. Any discussion along those lines? So the motion currently before the subcommittee is whether or not to switch implicit and unconscious, and the idea that the motion is to stick with implicit only. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and all opposed? All right. Okay.
And Brandon, if I may, I also make a motion that we, what was it? Oh, that we, instead of saying competency includes a lawyer's awareness of implicit bias, that I like the part where they said a lawyer should be aware of. So I make a motion that change be adopted to a lawyer should be aware of.
Okay. So striking the first part, which competencies include a lawyer's awareness. Just strike through that, just like I believe Brian's email did, and say a lawyer should be aware of implicit bias. Okay. Got a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Yeah. All opposed? Okay. Any other changes? Anybody want to put something about enhancing a lawyer's competence?
Brian, what
I
did you
love-
recommend? What can you like type up a sentence for us that we can play with like you did last time?
Well, yes. I created a bunch of alternatives because that's what
Of course you did.
That's what he does.
So, and this was kind of based upon looking at NCAJ, and I agree with it. Just to kind of let you know, this document has a number of things. The first one is the original one. I've made a 9A, which was the NCAJ proposal, and then a 9B and a 9C based upon how this discussion went. It sounds like you guys are looking at 9C, which is what I typed up. Can you all see that language on your screen? So it reads, a lawyer should be aware of, I guess we'll say, implicit bias and cultural differences relative to a client or anyone involved in a client's matter that might affect the lawyer's representation of the client. Such awareness enhances a lawyer's competency and works to ensure understanding of the client's need, effective communication with the client and others, and adequate representation of the client.
Anybody want to make a motion on that?
Brian, could you
discuss it.
scroll that down so we could see 9B also, just a little bit.
Yes. And just so we're clear, I have no, I guess, pride of ownership or anything here. Feel free to tear it up and suggest whatever you all think is most appropriate.
So this would be in place of what we were looking at earlier.
Yes, I think procedurally, if you all wanted to make an amendment, I guess, well, it's clear that we're going to be making some type of amendment, particularly with regards to including the notion that a lawyer should be aware as opposed to the language that we had before. So any proposal that this subcommittee comes up with would need to go back to ethics and executive and ultimately the council for publication. We'd go through another round of publication and receive comments and move on from there. So if there's I guess if there's any desire to kind of, sit and think on this, then, we could always have another subcommittee meeting. If now that we see where the subcommittee is going, you all want me to draft a couple of different versions, go through there. I know generally speaking, kind of the editing process during a meeting can sometimes be not as smooth and efficient, but I did draft these kind of anticipating where our conversation may go and just kind of trying to get some of the thoughts together in my own head. So we can move with these or edit these a bit or decide to meet another time. I see, Judge, you have your hand raised.
We did pretty good last time, I would say.
We
And it's
did
only-
do pretty good. That's
We did
true.
pretty good last time. And it's only a sentence, but I'm very direct. I think this is beautiful, Brian, honestly. But I'm very direct. I'd be perfectly fine with it saying the purpose of this comment is to enhance a lawyer's competency and work to ensure understanding of the client's needs, effective communication. I mean, like just laying it right out there that this is why we're doing it. This is the whole purpose of this, not to punish, but to enhance. And maybe even say that the purpose of this comment is not to punish, which is, and maybe not. I mean, maybe I'm just, but I mean, so many people have said they're going to punish us. It's a rule, and it's not. I don't know if we just need to lay that out there, but
Right.
shouldn't have to, because it's clear that the comments are aspirations. But I would be perfectly fine with it saying the purpose of this and just laying it all the way out.
So I guess you would be proposing something like The purpose of this comment is not to punish, but to enhance.
Exactly.
This would be,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna offer, that's, I appreciate the direct nature. It would be unique amongst our comments.
Yeah.
That's my, that's my only hesitation. It would be very unique in explicitly stating that, but I don't know. I got to think on that.
Yeah, I was
would
wondering
say-
maybe, oh, go ahead. I was just going to suggest maybe Alice or Carmen weigh in. I mean, I don't want to, like you say, I don't think I've ever seen a comment that direct, which I do like it though. I like the idea, but maybe Alice or
I
Carmen.
always appreciate Judge Dunstan's directness. I will say though, we do not use the word punish in connection with the disciplinary process. So that's the thing that stands out to me the most. And I don't think it would work to swap out the word discipline, because again, it would seem strange in a comment to a rule to specifically disclaim discipline, because then you kind of ask, what is this rule here for? So I think it would be hard to square with the existing language for those reasons.
I'm good with that for sure. I don't know. This is just so weird. It's just such a weird, and maybe it could just be the purpose of this comment is to enhance a lawyer's, it's like, and we can't make it any more clear than this. Maybe that's it. But I'm fine for whatever.
I think we ought to take the punishment out and maybe say enhance or enhance and guide or provide guidance or something like that, because I think that's what we're trying to do, is to trying to tell lawyers, these are things that would make you a better lawyer.
Aren't we trying to educate as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That seems to me, and if you're trying to reassure people that this is really not going to become, in all likelihood, the basis of professional discipline, then I would think to say to educate lawyers on, maybe the more subtle aspects of competency or something of that nature. And to thereby enhance competency.
I would prefer the word guide instead of educate, because then we're back into the same argument about definition.
So what do y'all think it should say? I like that. The purpose of this comment is to enhance and guide a lawyer's competency, or what do y'all think? Educate?
Enhance sounds good to me, but Colin, you got something you want to say?
Yeah, I know maybe this horse has already left the barn, but what Judge Dunstan was saying about the implicit bias, if we just said something about a lawyer should recognize bias and cultural differences, seems like to me the implicit bias word is sort of a hot button issue for folks that seems to make it, but what we want folks to do is to recognize biases and cultural differences in clients or witnesses or in the case, and whether their biases are unconscious or conscious. We want them to know about it and to use that in their deciding how to represent the client. But maybe if we just said that the lawyer should be aware of or recognize bias and cultural differences without describing those as unconscious or implicit. I don't know, just my thought, but may not, like I say, the horse may have already left the barn.
We can round up any horses that have gotten out and reconsider. Stuart?
It might be animal cruelty.
Yeah, I've been a part of similar discussions like that. And I think that the issue is that I think it's important to have either implicit or unconscious bias in there, because I do think those of us who litigate in particular, we are on the lookout for bias and cultural difference when we pick a jury or when we do any number of things. when we're representing our clients. But I feel that the point of this comment is to either remind us or to tell us if we're unaware that there are some biases that are unconscious and implicit of which we may not overtly be aware. And so we have to educate ourselves on those. And so I would be in favor of keeping in either implicit or unconscious. And then as far as the other amendments go, I'm getting kind of bogged down in this. I mean, I personally, if we're going to add a sentence like this, I preferred Brian's original language in 9C. I just feel that we're incorporating I guess it's comment 2 to the comments that says that these comments don't add additional requirements. They simply guide or whatever that language was. It seems like we're incorporating that language into this specific comment, but none of the other languages, none of the other comments incorporate that language. And so I would be hesitant to put punish or anything like that in there, but I thought Brian's prior language in 9C was fine if we want to put something like that in the comment.
Well, what say the committee?
I make a motion that we adopt 9C as it was before.
Second.
All right, we have a motion with a second.
I want to be clear. I just want to make sure that
Right.
I am doing everything correctly and get this guy back in there.
And
This
we took out unconscious, I think.
Oh, yes, and that would be the comment that is on the floor. Does that reflect your motion, Judge?
Okay, any discussion as to this option 9C that is now before us? All those in favor of adopting this indicate so. All opposed? I think we have a product.
All right.
Okay.
Well, this will go back before the Ethics Committee and Executive and ultimately to the Council if it passes through those committees for publication. We will report back. I will certainly keep the subcommittee informed as things progress.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for everything, buddy.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
All right.
See you, everyone.
Take care, everyone.